Hello again, it's me Carly and I'm here to sew with you today. Last year I made a Cecilie Bahnsen inspired dress and it was bad. I failed. I did so many mistakes. I couldn't figure it out. I used the wrong fabric. All such things have led to me not being able to stop thinking about it for literally every single day since I made it. And I think the only thing that's going to cure my frustration is simply making it again, but better. And that is what today is for. Before I make this dress, if we haven't met, my name is Carly. I'm a sewist here on YouTube. I really like making things, and that's all you need to know. Let's go. This is the dress. I've tried to wear it multiple times, and every time I wear it, I feel so frustrated in the literal bones of my body. So sad, frustrated, mad, angry, and sad. I'm being a little bit dramatic. Let's fix this, and I'm gonna show you everything I've learned in the process of how to make this better. I really debated about what fabric I wanted to use. I was like, oh, the original design is so floaty and feminine and sweet, but really, I wanna use scraps, I want a patchwork, and I stumbled into this incredible color palette at the op shop last week. And I haven't been able to stop thinking about this. So we're gonna do this sweet feminine dress in these gnarly little suiting, shirting checks and brown colors. I'm really excited about it. If you watched my first Cecilie Bahnsen inspired dress video, you're gonna know this project and maybe you'll be excited to see the changes. And if you haven't seen it, don't worry. I'm about to do it again, baby. I'm just gonna leave it hanging here to mock me, but also so that I can just see what I did so I can emulate it and just like remember the process and steps and such. I really debated making this video because I was like, it's not very interesting to make the same thing twice. But I also feel like the way that I learned to sew on YouTube was literally just watching people make mistakes and then fix them. So I think it's kind of actually helpful to share such things. I don't know. If you're bored, you can click away, but let me make the mistakes for you and maybe you'll just have a smoother ride because of it. Also, something I've been getting into recently is using a bunch of mismatched threads in my overlocking machine. If I'm working patchwork, I just pick a bunch of threads that have the same color palette as my garment, and it's really fun and it's such a good way to use threads that maybe are existing from projects past, or you've thrifted, or just colors that you really don't get to using. I greatly enjoy using up my supplies, and this really helps with that. Sewing is cool, but you know what's even cooler? Changing your overlocking threads successfully. I really don't have a patchwork plan for this piece because all of my pieces of fabric are quite large. So I think I'm just gonna cut out my pattern pieces and then chop them up and use the scraps from the chopping as patchwork pieces, and basically I'm gonna wing it.
I don't go super in depth into patchworking in this video, but basically I'm just cutting out some shapes that fit my pattern piece, sewing them right sides together, and then just creating a new textile that has multiple pieces of fabric combined in it. It's pretty cool.
The last time I made this dress, I was trying to be all couture with it, and I was doing like French seams and bias tape finishing, and this time I'm just making it for me, and I want it to be fun for me, so I'm doing my seams at a 1/2 inch seam allowance, and I'm overlocking them, babe. I'm overlocking them. It gets the job done.
Honestly, sometimes I do love a really good finish and spending time on the details and such, but sometimes I just want to go fast and I want to sew crazy and like a mad lady, and it's very fun. And this is what I was doing today. The next thing I did was sew in the darts for the front part of the bodice, and honestly, if you want some more detail about this process, maybe checking out my first Cecilie Bahnsen dress video would be helpful. I go a little bit more in depth into how I drafted the pattern and such details like that.
I am just using my front and back pattern pieces that I made in that video, so you should be able to follow along from that one to get all of the information you need. The only differences in this video is that I'm going to be patchworking and I'm going to be fixing all of my weird construction mistakes.
The next part of this process is really simple. It's just attaching these back yoke pieces to the front pieces, right sides together at the shoulder seams, and then I just overlocked that seam and pressed it towards the back so it was nice and neat.
Now that I've attached the back to the front, of my dress piece, I have to do all of the straps and such. Now, when I made this the first time, I had a suggestion to line it instead of using a bunch of bias tape finishes, and I thought that's actually so smart. However, I don't think it's possible. I used bias tape to finish all of this seam here, and it goes all the way under the sleeve and down the side of the dress. And I believe that if I line it and put the straps in at the same time, I won't be able to get my bias tape finish for the sleeve done, because this actually sits underneath the straps. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure I'm right. So I'm gonna commit to bias tape. Also am reassured because I believe the original dress from Cecilie Bahnsen is finished with bias tape. So my plan is bias tape finish everything, and hopefully I can just attach the straps in a little bit of a neater fashion. I'm having a hard time deciding what bias tape color to go with, so I think I might just patchwork a bunch of different fabrics together to make a big long bias tape and just have like alternating colors throughout all of my bias tape, because it's going to be patchworked anyway.
When I started learning how to make bias tape at home, I actually had no idea that you had to cut it on the diagonal. I thought it was just any piece of fabric that you folded in half and half again. And to some extent, that is exactly what bias tape looks like, but you have to cut it on the diagonal so that it has the most amount of stretch and give, so that when you finish your seams, like I'm doing this neckline and this clip here, it has a little bit of stretch and give that helps you get around those fiddly areas like curved seams and armbands. That's a little fun fact if you didn't know that.
Sad news, I made the same mistake twice. This edge of the back needs to be covered in bias tape before you attach the neckline. Silly!
I'm rewatching Parks and Rec with my boyfriend at the moment, and I love this line that Jerry says, and he's like, it wouldn't be government work if you didn't have to do it twice. And that is exactly how I felt about making this mistake 2 times in a row with both dresses that I did. But whatever. I finished that, and then I finished the bias tape portion of the neckline, and then I was able to move on.
One of the real problematic things that happened in my first round of making this dress was that the fabric that I chose was so stretchy and flimsy, and it was kind of like peeling away, like the threads were like disintegrating off the dress as I was working with it, and it just didn't press. I could not get my iron to make a literal crease in that fabric, which just makes some projects really difficult. So I've made sure that the fabrics I'm working with this time around are very willing to be pressed with an iron, because it's just going to make everything a lot easier to work with. I see a little toile of the sleeve pattern that I think I want to use, and this time around I'm really enjoying making this, because first time round I was just trying to emulate exactly what the designer dress looked like, and this time it's like, I think I just want a slightly different sleeve. And you know what? Who's gonna wear it? Me! So that's fine. I'm just gonna go with a puff sleeve like this. It just has a little bit more volume in the back portion of the sleeve, and it has quite a nice puff at the top of the sleeve, and I think it's gonna be super cute. Okay, I just had to sew a full sleeve in just to remember how to do this, and it is a little bit tricky, but it was easier the second time around. You're basically just going to have the center of the top portion of your puff sleeve match the shoulder seam. So you're going to align those 2 points, then match all of the front of the puff sleeve to the front of the bodice, and match most of the back of the sleeve to the back of the bodice. I have about 4 inches of overhang left at the back of the sleeve and about 1 centimeter of overhang at the front of the sleeve, and that just ensures that you're going to be able to attach the sleeve together at the side seam, and that there will be enough room for your arm to fit in this sleeve that we are creating. Once you attach the sleeve with a straight stitch, you can also close up the side seam with a straight stitch and then overlock both the side seam and the entirety of the armhole area. We will then finish a portion of that seam with bias tape in a moment. Are you with me? Stay with me, we can do it. Also, one of the problems I had with my initial prototype of this dress was that the gathering was kind of uneven on the top of the puff of the sleeve. Like I didn't measure it and it kind of just gathered all the way around the back instead of it being on the top of the sleeve. So this time I'm being a bit more precise. I've marked where the center of the sleeve is, and I've also marked where I want the gathering stitches to go to. So that way my gathering stitches will be even, and I'll make sure that the center of my sleeve and the center of my gathers is in the center of the bodice, which is that shoulder seam. This is just a little adjustment I've made, and it will make the sleeve look good and feel a lot better too. It felt bad with the gathers all uneven. Yeah.
I started gathering stitches along the top side of the sleeve, and then I gathered it by hand and started pinning it to the bodice. Now I was very excited that the second time around making this section of the dress, it was making more sense. The first time around it absolutely broke my brain. So if you're giving it your first go, just know it's going to get easier. Once I sewed that top part of the sleeve to the bodice, then I was able to close up the side seam with that extra seam allowance that I made sure to leave unsewed. Then I overlocked that seam to finish it, and I also overlocked the inside of the arm edge as well.
Now that I've attached the sleeves, I'm basically just going to run some gathering stitches around the bottom, gather up the sleeves, and finish off that with a tiny bit of bias tape as a cuff. Then the sleeves are more or less done. Yeah! I would definitely recommend trying on your piece before you finish the sleeves so that you can just feel and make sure, oh, they feel even. This is a good, tightness around my arm. Because honestly, I've made sleeves too tight, I've made them too loose, I've made them different dimensions on either arm, and it's just really annoying. So lessons from a girl who's failed a lot of times. I'm really happy with mine, so let's finish them.
What's up? It's Editing Carly. I just had to let you know that I did not end up liking the way I made those bias tape cuffs. It kind of messed them up. They were too tight, the fabric was itchy, and I did not like the way that I folded it over to the front side. It was really weird decision making. I ended up unpicking them and redoing them. I cut my cuffs out of a different fabric and I cut them on the grain, I think that's what it is. So it wasn't stretchy, it wasn't bias tape. Cut them on the grain, sewed them into a cuff, and then used that as a regular binding finish. So I did fold it in half and then half again, and then use it as a binding like you would a quilt. And I just felt like it looked a lot cleaner. And yeah, that's all. I just needed to let you know that what I showed you, I didn't really like. You live and you learn.
Awesome. Now that I've finished the sleeves properly, I'm going to take bias tape and go from the side seam all the way up the back of the sleeve and all the way to the back where the ties are going to go. And that bias tape is going to go from side seam to the end of the tie and finish everything.
I pinned my bias tape down so that I could ensure that I had an equal amount of bias tape left at the end of the seam to create the ties for the back of the dress. I then sewed it down and then flipped it over and sewed it completely down, as well as like finishing the edge of the bias tape tie. I wanted to include all of the clips in this video just so that if you're making it, hopefully you can see clearly what I did and it won't be as confusing as the first time I filmed this. I think my second time around it was much easier than the first, so do not be discouraged. You can do it.
Okay, now that I've gotten through that little tricky piece of sewing, I'm just going to assemble all of my back straps. I'm going to sew all my straps right sides together along the long edge and on the short edge as well, flip them right sides out, give them a good press, and then attach them to the bodice. And then all we have left to do is the skirt. Now that I've done all of the bows, all we have left to do is the skirt, and there are two main improvements I want to make to my skirt. The first is I need to even out the gathers. On my first dress, there was more gathering on one side of the skirt than the other, and because it was split into two, you could really notice that one side was heavier, and the whole skirt would kind of like sway to that side, and it was just so frustrating. So I'm gonna put notches in my skirt to show me where I'm going to be gathering and make sure that those dimensions are even. The second thing is that in my first round of this dress, I had a problem with gaping in this back portion of the dress. I fixed it by putting in some elastic, but it still hangs too low for my liking. And I think this time I want to try putting in some ties, not unlike the ties you might find on a gift bag that you can kind of pull out. You can kind of pull out and that will tighten the fabric. I don't know if it's going to work, but I'm pretty sure that it's worth trying. Those are my two things to work on, but firstly I have to patchwork my big textile, so I'm going to do that off camera. You guys have seen me patchwork before, and if you haven't, go check out some of my other videos where I go into depth about patchworking. But yeah, I'm going to make the textile and come back to you when it's time to do some interesting construction. I'm here now with my big skirt. It's probably about 3 meters long, and I'm just taking out my pattern that I used for the front of my bodice. I'm flipping it wrong side down, and I'm going to cut out this curved piece from the front portions of the skirt, and that's just going to help it to be easier to sew on the curve. I've also just placed pins evenly on either side of the skirt, and that's going to let me know how far I want my gathers to go, and the rest of the skirt on this side of the pins is going to be manually gathered for the back portion of the skirt. Okay, it's on. I have to be honest with you, I really struggled attaching this skirt for the second time. I actually ended up cutting it at the center back and just working in 2 separate pieces. I really feel like I haven't mastered the shape of this front section. I had to do quite a bit of maneuvering so that this front portion didn't look too warped or weird. It's still not perfect, but it's okay. I think I'm just really appreciating the second time round that this piece is really challenging to make. Anyway, it's kind of the end of the day, so I think I'm probably gonna sign off for now and do the finishing touches tomorrow. But yeah, she's a tough one. As I tried it on too, I was like, hang on, is this really ugly? No, it's the worst feeling. I was like, wait, I think what I've done is ugly. I'm gonna finish it though. Maybe it'll be fine when it's done.
I closed up the center back seam of the skirt and overlocked the raw edge. I then overlocked the top edge as well of the skirt and then flipped it inside to the wrong side of the fabric just once, and that was just to do some sort of clean finish for that area. Then I made this little tube and I top stitched that down to the back of the skirt, and that was going to act as my tube to thread my little ribbon through.
I got this red piping ribbon from my grandma, and I'm just going to thread it through this channel that I created, and I'm just going to cross all of my fingers that what I've done here is actually going to work. But I'm not so sure.
I attached a safety pin to the end of my red ribbon and threaded it all the way through this casing, and then I threaded it through once more so that it would have this capability of bunching the fabric up when I pulled each string end. And honestly, it was very effective, although I wish there was slightly less bunching, maybe a little bit less fabric, but hey, you live and you learn.
I hemmed the dress and it is done. I've done my hair and makeup, it's on my body. I'm feeling more excited about it now that it's fully finished. But I wanted to chat through the things that I learned about whilst making this project, because honestly the second time round has just validated to me how challenging this dress really is. After making it twice in 2 different kinds of fabrics, one was like a stretchy, lightweight sort of fabric, and this one was more like shirting and heavier cottony kind of fabrics. I feel strongly that this dress design is going to look best in a very, very lightweight fabric. I think that I got confused because the shape of the dress feels so voluminous, and so I thought it would contain a lot of fabric, but I actually think that the volume is achieved through the stiffness and the natural puffiness of the fabric, and less so about the amount of the fabric. Even with this skirt, I started with 3 meters of skirt, I cut it down to probably about 2. Now, I actually think it's much less than that still. My gathering idea at the back with that little channel and the ribbon did work. I think it's probably pretty close to what Cecilie Bahnsen do with their dresses. I'm not confident exactly. And although it did work for this, I felt like there was way too much fabric to be pulling through with that thread. I think that technique is going to work best with much less skirt. And that's good information. It still worked. I still don't mind it, but I would go for less next time. Also, I actually ended up making my sleeve band too small. It fits perfectly at the bottom of my arm, and then when I stretch up, my gnarly biceps just don't really allow it to comfortably pass. So if this is a dress that I enjoy wearing, that's something that I'm going to fix in the future. Still haven't figured out the shape of the skirt pattern properly, and honestly, I don't really know in my brain what it's meant to be, and I'm happy with not knowing. My final thoughts are, maybe not every design of dress is meant to be patchworked. Maybe the balance of where I've put the colours is a little off. I'm not exactly sure. Maybe the colours are just not really vibing for me. I really like the fabrics I chose, but I'm not sure if I like them for this dress. And I'm not really sure why. I think it's just a vibe thing, and I'm happy to just leave it at that. Sometimes when you patchwork, it's just gonna be a bit weird, and I think that's fine, because you're kind of just playing a random game and having fun with it most of the time. And after all of that, my final thought is, after making this dress twice, I might not like this style of dress very much. I like it. It's fine. I don't know if I love it on my body. I don't know why it took me 2 times to figure that out, but maybe I was just so blinded by the original beauty of the Cecilie Bahnsen dress. So I thought I would make it work for myself. But yeah, maybe it's just not my style, and that's okay. So much of sewing is experimentation, and I do forget to give myself grace in that process. I just like making something and it being perfect, and I love it on me. But sometimes you make stuff, and even if it's cool, you don't like it for yourself, and that's fine. It's such a big creative process. There's so many artistic choices you have to make along the way, and really, making something that you love wearing is kind of like a special little miracle. So I think something that I need to take away from this project as well is just to appreciate when a project goes well and celebrate that win. And when a project goes slightly weird, not to worry about it too much. It's so much easier said than done, but I'm gonna try and work on that. That's enough yapping! Wowza! Anyway, thank you so much for watching. I appreciate you so much. As always, let me know what you're working on. I love hearing about all of your projects, all of your learnings, your tips, your knowledge. Let's combine all of our sewing fandom together in the comments section. I will see you there. And I hope you have a really wonderful week. I'm sending you lots of love. See you in the next one, yo. Peace out. Bye.